So it's nice to be here as always. Let me just start with a couple of quick announcements just to make sure I get everything. For those of you outside of the United States who've scheduled sessions with me, I'm going to encourage you just to check your time zone math and send me an email if you have any question about the session time. Sometimes with technology, machines get confused, programs get confused, so just double check with me about that. For those of you tuning in at a later date, Satsang will be I'm not sure, an hour earlier or an hour later. So check the math with the United States and see where we're landing. A big thank you for everyone and your generous donations and support. That is very, very helpful. It's helpful to keep this alive and this teaching spreading in a generous way. I like to give these teachings for free on Sunday nights, but it's nice to have support to pay for the programming, the technology, the internet, all the computers and cameras. So truly, from my heart to yours, thank you for your ongoing support. Okay, let's see, what else do I have here on my list? In regards to an upcoming retreat, I am hesitating a little bit, just due to all this stuff on the news about the coronavirus, and people have been asking me about the coronavirus and my thoughts, and my teacher, he spoke to me like I was with him during the Y2K. And then I think back in 2005, Amma was saying that something great was going to happen on the earth, and that it's good to be prepared. And then there was this giant tsunami in 2005, and then we got prepared for the end of the world, coming in 2012, the end of the Mayan calendar. And a few years back again, Amma made a prediction, or a warning, is basically what it was, about 2020. She said something grave is coming, and here we are in 2020, and people had all kinds of ideas and theories about a great solar flare and earthquakes and all kinds of craziness, but here we are with the coronavirus outbreak, and this is what I'm going to encourage everyone, to do, is just to be wise. Just to be wise. This basic experience of being human, we've relied on systems, we've relied on food being in the store all the time, and we've relied on just habit of just everything being free and easy, especially in the Western world. And by free and easy, I mean you can walk out of your house without being attacked, without bombs flying in the air. There's food on the shelves, generally speaking. But there is a basic wisdom, that oftentimes farmers know, and people who've lived close to nature, people like me who live in the mountains and sometimes get 4 feet of snow all of a sudden. It's just good to be a little bit stocked up on the essentials. Just have a good supply of water, a couple weeks of food supply. All my friends who are farmers, they'll have, a whole winter's supply of food. And, there's nothing wrong with having a couple of big bags of rice in your house and, a big bag of beans, just in case we need to weather the storm. And it's just wise. It's not going into fear. It's just being wise. And of course, everyone being extra careful with washing your hands and not coughing over on everyone if you get sick or whatever it is. Someone emailed me today saying that there's a good chance they have the coronavirus. And other people I know, they're in quarantine right now, like in Italy or in China. And so I encourage us all, like as we go through this as a collective, can we send love to our brothers and sisters and not walk around with enormous fear, just looking at everyone like, oh my God, they have it. They're going to breathe on me. We're all going to die. Let's not go there, but let's just be wise. Just have basic wisdom. Up in the Seattle area, they're telling you don't stand within 6 feet of any human being. And if there's an outbreak, that makes sense. But if you are keeping your distance, make sure you're also shining your heart, that your heart is open. That we're not looking at, other human beings like, they're going to kill us with their their very presence. It's pretty disturbing when you see what's happening in the media. Some sources are saying it's no big deal and it's not nearly as bad as having the flu. But then if you look at European media or what's happening in China, where they're literally sweeping people up off the street with the like that dog catcher noose kind of snare thing, and putting hoods over their head. Something's going on here on planet Earth. Something's going on. If they're quarantining whole cities of 10 million people. And so I encourage you, just be safe. Just be safe and be wise, and there's nothing wrong with having some preparations. It's just basic wisdom, not fear, but basic wisdom. And see, as we are awake, the more and more we become awake, we look at life, we look at the situation, we look at what in Zen they call reality, and you see what's happening clearly. And from a place of clarity, you respond. You respond with love. You respond with truth. You respond with power. You respond with compassion. But a choice to respond. It's not reactive. The ego reacts out of fear or desire. But I encourage you to respond from a place of truth. Just look at what is true. Like in Colorado, last week, we had our first and then our second case of the coronavirus. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not allowed to leave my house. And I need to be shut up here like a doomsday prepper. But, if it does come to my town, people travel and they travel quickly and this thing tends to spread. And we just want to be wise. If someone's hacking away, keep your distance from them. Keep your distance. And have a little food in the cupboard. Just be wise. Sometimes spiritual people, instead of being egoically fearful, they become hyperly positive with their head in the clouds, acting like nothing can touch them. Ramana Maharshi died of cancer. And Jesus was nailed to a cross. Buddha was poisoned. Like, we're all going to die. This planet is confusing. It's confusing at times because there's so much grace, so much love, so much beauty all around us. And simultaneously, there's war, there's violence, there's genocide. There's horrific things. And it's a very bizarre experience being human on planet Earth. And so I encourage you just to be wise. Be wise and just have a little bit of stuff stocked up. And collectively, I invite us to send love to those who are struggling. Like, boy, this, for the month of February, almost the whole month, I was really struggling with the flu, and it's just no fun. When you're drowning and in mucus or pneumonia or whatever it is. And life can be difficult. So let us send love in the direction of our brothers and sisters and fellow beings on this path. Let us not send animosity, but send love. Send love in every direction, while at the same time being wise. This is the truth of Jesus. It's the truth of the Buddha. It's the truth of the awakened ones. They are not reactive. They respond with love, with truth, with power, with clarity. With clarity. And so, I'm sure we'll continue to check in about this. Just, a couple moments ago when I was checking my email, I received about 9 emails about the coronavirus. And even one from Open Gate Sangha, which is Adyashanti's Sangha, basically saying we're going to continue to have the retreats that we have scheduled this year, but, we'll keep you all updated. And so let's not go into fight or flight, but let us all be wise. This is how the awakened being goes forward, is with wisdom and clarity when things are dark on planet Earth. Okay. So, I think those are the big announcements. Let's see what else I have here. Wesley asked me this question, and maybe I'll read the question and offer a little bit of definition here. If I can pull it up here. Wesley writes, Craig, in the last session you shared the teaching with me that karma is momentum. That is a simple and powerful way to understand it. It makes me think that karma, samskaras, habitual tendencies or addictions, and vasanas, the seeds of desire, and conditioning are all momentum. The momentum of running away from unpleasant experiences and chasing after external pleasures. The recognition of true nature seems to pull the plug on the momentum, or on the movement, but it takes a while for the movement to die down. Is that a good way to look at it? Is there anything else you can say about karma and momentum? Thanks. Yeah, I'd like to say this. In the last number of years, I was working with an individual who was a part of a Buddhist Sangha, and they taught a very literal understanding of karma. That say, if I tell a lie, in this lifetime, that basically next lifetime I'm going to come back as a worm, or something really silly. Or, if I tell a lie in this lifetime, next lifetime everyone's going to be lying to me and cheating me and robbing me, stealing from me. And, I don't think God is that basic, and that, that life is not that basic as that fundamentalist view presents. If you do something bad right away, you'll be punished for it. When people have, let me see if I can say this kindly, when people have very underdeveloped psyches, their view of morality is very black and white. It's never right to steal. It's never, it's never right to lie. It's never right to kill. It's never right, to break any of the 10 commandments. And this type of thinking breeds fundamentalism. It's very black and white. This is how hate groups are formed, racist groups formed, from, a consciousness that doesn't understand complexity. As we mature on the path, and our psyche matures, our understanding matures, we begin to see gray everywhere. And as we begin to see gray areas, it starts to open up our worldview, our understanding, that karma is not just black and white. It's a very, simple view is to think of karma as black and white. A more proper understanding, or more sophisticated understanding, is that karma is a momentum. And so say, for example, I am a compulsive liar. We'll make it fun here. If I'm a compulsive liar, I'm going to create the momentum of always telling lies. And these lies in compulsive lying is fueled by insecurity. And so I have a seed of insecurity within me. It grows and it's projected, and then it manifests to say for something, for example, like compulsive lying. And once you start lying, we've all probably had this experience when we were young. We took a cookie out of the cookie jar, and mommy or daddy said, "Did you take the cookie?" And we said, "No, it was the dog." It wasn't me. I saw him jump up on the counter or whatever it was. And then see, we start getting into this momentum of thinking that it's okay to lie. And then it becomes a habit. It becomes a samskara. It becomes a tendency that gets more and more deep within us, more and more habitual. Modern day neuroscience, speaks about this in a real similar way with neurons within the brain. If you start doing a habit like, say, smoking, and you just keep doing that, you start to create these bundles of neurons. And so you're automatically just reaching for the cigarettes every day at the same time, whether you want it or not. The same with Coca-Cola or a drink, or, if you're a sarcastic human being. And so karma, basically it's a collection of habits that forms a tendency that creates a momentum. And the more we repeat the habit, the greater momentum gets behind it. So some people get into all kinds of flows of momentum, whether it's lying or stealing or just being sarcastic, or, some people are aloof. They've gotten to the momentum of just being aloof, and that's become a samskara. Samskara is like a tendency, a habit. All these things are interrelated. But the idea here is back to what I was speaking about with being awake, is when we are awake, we step back from our samskaras, these deep tendencies. We step back from the vasanas, the seeds of the tendencies, and we look and we see there's both subtle, and overt karmic flows within our nervous system. And the awakened being will step back and just look at these with clarity and say, how do I want to live? If I want to stay awake, I must live in alignment with truth. If I want to live as a heart-based person, I can't be lying all the time. Because anytime you lie, you put a wall between you and life. You've stepped out of reality. You've stepped out of truth. And so instead of seeing karma as like a thing of cause and effect, you do something and then something comes back to you. And you just begin to see it as these flows of momentum. That I can be in the flow of love and kindness and clarity. Awakened consciousness. I can be in that flow. Or I can be in a flow of, cheating or defending or guarding or always needing to be right. Couples get into this flow. And it can be hilarious. I used to do couples counseling, and, couples would come in and they would just, all they wanted to do was be right. And I would ask them a question like, do you want to be right or do you want to be married? Like, what do you want? Do you want to be right or do you want to be married? And see, when we see that, when we see this momentum in us, this attachment to being right, and we're willing to step out of it and say, well, what does my heart want? Well, my heart wants to be in love. My heart doesn't want to be right. It doesn't care about being right. My heart wants to be in love. To be in love. And so I encourage you just to look at your momentum, to look at your flows, to look at your tendencies. And so sometimes it's helpful just to step away, step out of yourself, and just look and see. How does my partner see me? How does my boss see me? How do my coworkers see me? How does my children see me? step into someone else's shoes. And then very easily, you can begin to see the momentum of your psyche, how it's flowing, the karma of your psyche. You can step into the vast view of God and look at your karma, look at your partner's karma, look at the world's karma. And in a very compassionate way, you can say, well, how shall I respond? Like, how shall I respond to the coronavirus? Should I get lots of guns and lock myself in my house? Get ready to shoot anyone who comes knocking on my front door that want my 25-pound bag of rice, Or, am I going to be a doomsday prepper? Or am I going to respond with love to the situation? Am I going to pray for my brothers and sisters on planet Earth? Am I going to be wise? In my thoughts and my deeds and my actions. And so that's a great question, Wesley. So thanks for bringing it forward. One of the things that I like to do a couple times a year, or throughout the year, is to take myself and put myself in situations where I will literally fail. And let me give you an example. So this weekend I went out into the desert, and I go rock climbing with a very rough crew of guys. Like, these guys are like pirates. They're wild. They're crazy. A couple of them are professional climbers, and they really challenge me, because they're not soft, gentle, crystal rubbing, spiritual individuals. They're a pretty rough crew that I go run with sometimes. And it helps me to get out of my little spiritual bubble, is to be around these guys. Now of course, we go to a very spiritual place, this place called Indian Creek, Utah. And it is one of the most beautiful places on planet Earth. I just love it. And basically they hike me up these bluffs. If you've ever been to Arizona or Utah, you see these big like sandstone bluffs, that kind of just rise up, and they desert towers sometimes they're called. And basically they're big plumes of lava, and then they cooled real quick, and then they made these cracks that are like this big, and the crack will go up a couple 100 feet. And the idea is we hike up. You got to hike up to the beginning of the climb, which is might be a couple miles. That in and of itself is a feat. And I'm just getting over the flu, so I'm in terrible shape. And then you get up there, and basically you stick your hands in the crack, and you jam it in there. And it's the most awkward, bizarre type of rock climbing. And you jam your toes in, and kind of climb up like a ninja. And it is so utterly difficult. It's the most difficult type of rock climbing, and I'm terrible at it, to be honest. In comparison to them, I'm probably excellent in comparison to any of you who don't rock climb, but relatively speaking, compared to my friends, I'm terrible at it. And it is so good for me to go out there and just be radically humbled. It's good for me to go out there and fail, and to trip, and to fall, and to see my friends, climb 150 feet in 2 minutes, and for me to take, an hour to do that same climb. It's good for me. It's humbling. As a spiritual teacher, as a counselor, people come to me and they expect I have the answers. They project, all this, that I know everything, and I'm in a position of power and authority. And for me to go out there and be the lowest guy on the totem pole is so good, because it breaks up the momentum. It breaks up any arrogance that may be forming in my mind, in my consciousness, thinking that I'm hot stuff and I know everything and this and that. And so when we go and we do things that we fail at, It's humbling for our ego. It breaks up our karmic momentum. It kind of lets us know you're a human being, you're mortal, and you're divine, but you don't have all the answers. You can't do everything perfectly. It's good to fail at something, but to try hard at it as well, because I try incredibly hard. Like, all my muscles are so fried. My body is beat up. I have scabs and, places that were bleeding all over yesterday and today. And it's good, to kind of be, on the lower end of the totem pole every now and then. Because it breaks up, it helps us to step back and look at our life. When we live in our little spiritual bubble all the time and think that this is the one and only way, my spiritual experience is all about me, we can become quite narcissistic, and we can become quite padded from life. The more padded and narcissistic we become, the easier it is for this momentum to continue, the karmic momentum. But when we get ourselves in places where we are uncomfortable, it breaks up that momentum. It starts to knock down those walls. And it's radically helpful. It helps you to get out of your everyday habits. I spend most of my day sitting in a chair. And for me to put on a heavy pack and a bunch of climbing gear and hustle up the side of a mountain and then go to try to crack climb with pro climbers, it's a great thing for me to do. Just to go out and to break it up. Just as soon as I got in my van and started to drive away, I started to feel my normal habits falling away, like the normal tendencies that I would be doing, say on a Friday, then on a Saturday morning. Because we've had cabin fever here in Colorado, and it's good just to get out and break things up. The more willing you are to go and try new things and be humbled, the less likely you're going to get into deep grooves of karma and some skaras, and you're going to start to uproot the seeds of asanas within the body, within the nervous system. So this is good. Okay, so I better move along here with the questions, but thank you, Wes. Here's a question from Suresh, who's out in the Caribbean. Suresh has been going through an incredible awakening process. And through this process, he's had the experience, I believe, of losing a business. And then he's writing to me that he had to declare bankruptcy a few days ago. And he writes, the first night was like a grieving, and as the days pass, a deeper sense of peace has arisen within pockets of a busy mind working out on what to do going forward. I seem to be getting help from people all of a sudden, which I never expected. I am just allowing things to be, but at the same time act when needed. Craig, can you kindly shine some light or share anything of insight into this phase of awakening? Yeah, and Suresh, I'll say this, that for some of us on the path of spiritual awakening, we go through a phase of emptying out. And in the emptying out phase, God is literally doing what I was speaking about a moment ago. Is God is trying to empty out our deep karmic momentum that we have. And so sometimes God will just, speak to us in the form of our wife, our ex-wife, our partner, our ex-partner, our children, saying, hey, mom or dad, sister, brother. When you speak, you're not very kind. When you speak, you're kind of aloof. When you went through the spiritual awakening process, you started to think you knew everything, but you really don't. And so sometimes life speaks to us and helps us to examine ourselves. And life gives us external input. But sometimes life comes along and takes away our job, our career. In this case, Suresh had a shop on one of those little islands in the Caribbean, and And the good news is, Suresh, that God has a great plan for you. A great plan. But when I say this to people, that God has a great plan for you, oftentimes people get this idea of, oh, that means I'm going to become Eckhart Tolle. I'm going to be a great spiritual teacher, and everywhere I go, there'll be 800 students willing to pay, $500 for the weekend to hang out with me and listen to me share my great Dharmic truth. It's not always that way for us. It's not always that way. And so when I say God has a great plan for you, I mean a great plan, a plan that's greater than being a shopkeeper. But unfortunately, sometimes God has to take our livelihood away from us. Sometimes God has to crush some things in our life. Has to destroy some things. Behind me is the great Kali Ma. And sometimes during the phase, a later phase of awakening, she'll come in and she'll take things from us. She'll take a job, a career, a boyfriend, a partner, whatever it is, and take them away so that something greater can come. But in order for something greater to come, you have to do your work. You have to be willing to look inside and ask, am I attached to this old business? Am I willing to let it go? Am I willing to trust? And simultaneously, am I willing to do what is wise going forward? Now, all of us have to pay rent to live on planet Earth, unless you have a great trust fund. Some of us might, but most of us don't. And so if you don't have a great trust fund, sometimes God makes us get a side job. God gave me many side jobs, before I fully got on my feet again. But God took my house, my job, my business, took a wife, a son, took so much from me. And it was brutal, it was painful. So I encourage you, Suresh, to grieve fully, let go, surrender. But surrender means letting go, but surrender also means showing up and stepping forward. And so if there's no money in the bank, go get a job. But while you're getting a job, whatever that job is, whether it's a janitor or a banker or anything in between, while you're working that job, I encourage you to listen to your heart and say, what is true in my heart? What's true? What wants to come forward? What is the phoenix within me that wants to rise out of the ashes? And see, the great way we break up the momentum of karma is through you going and listening directly to your heart and saying, what is my truth? Karma will tell you your habitual flow, the flow of your ancestors, the flow of your mother, your father. Like I grew up in a military family, and so my karma was I was supposed to join the military at age 17. Just like my father, just like my older brother, just like their fathers, or, my grandpas, and all that, my uncles. That's what I was supposed to do according to the karmic flow of my family. But I stopped and I listened to my heart. And within my heart said this funny thing. My heart told me to become a vegetarian, start meditating at age 14. Go to the library, get some books on Buddhism, start studying yoga. And so I did. And when you listen to your heart, you get into a different type of flow. You come into the mind of God. And when you come into the mind of God, you have less karma. But if you listen to the mind of habit, you'll just create lots of karma. And so, anyways, these are great questions. Let's see here. What else is popping up in the feed here? Here's something that that Wesley wrote. He writes, Craig, this pain, it is a glacier moving through you and carving out deep valleys and creating spectacular landscapes and nourishing the ground with precious minerals and other stuff. This is lyrics from a John Grant song called Glacier. Yeah, Wesley, that's beautiful. It's beautiful. One of the things that most of us don't realize about pain on the spiritual path is pain is an incredible motivator. It helps us to grow. It helps us to go deep within us. Yesterday I was on this big climb out in Indian Creek. The name of the climb was called Wounded Knee. And like each of the routes are named. There's thousands of climbs out there. It's like endless out there. But I was on this climb called Wounded Knee, and it was, the grade of it, I believe, was, 5'11 or 5'10 plus. It was just above my skill level. There was no way I was going to get up this thing. But before I started the climb, I just put my forehead up against that sandstone cliff. And I said, Lord, I'm going to climb, I'm going to climb this crack. And I'm going to do it to glorify you. Give me the strength. Come into me and help me get up this. And boy, I got about, I couldn't even get off the ground for the first couple minutes. It was, such a difficult climb. I was sliding all over the place. My feet were just falling out. My hands were hurting. And then I said the prayer again. And then pretty soon, I was about 20 feet up the climb. And then I got to this place where I couldn't go any further, within the crack. It was too, couldn't get my hands in. I couldn't get any grip on it. I couldn't get the wedge in there. And I was really struggling. I was flailing all over the place. And I said the prayer again, Lord, give me the strength. And my friend Johnny, who I climb with, he said, Craig, you are getting to the bolts. That means like the top where the rope is bolted in. We're not leaving till you get into the bolts. And I thought, oh, geez, I got to get up to this thing. And we sat there, for a good part of 45 minutes. He sat there while I was just hustling and bleeding and sweating and shaking and trembling and praying. And being humbled again and again and again. And praying and praying and struggling and fighting. And surrendering and coming forward. And my Lord, if I, by the grace of God, the strength of God, I finally made it to the top. And there was about, a good 20 times when I was ready to say, I can't do this. There is no way I'm getting up this. My friend Johnny, he believed in me. And it's good to have this on the path. It's good to have someone who believes in you. That's a big part of my job, is to look out at you all and to see you as divine beings. This is your job as a being on the spiritual path, to look at your brothers and sisters and to believe in them. When you believe in another individual's divinity, it breaks up their karma. It helps them to awaken to their truth, their goodness, their love, their beauty. Because there's too many people on planet Earth who will believe in your ego, who will fight with your ego, who will project upon your ego, who will only see your ego. It's one of the, how shall I say this? When I first woke up, I cried so hard. I was just bawling my eyes out. Because I realized that so many of us, we look at each other and we just see each other's ego. We don't see each other's goodness. We don't see each other's light. It's my ego talking to your ego. This is what the Buddha called samsara. My ego is talking to your ego. When we're in a relationship, My ego is talking to your ego. But as we wake up and our heart is just blown open, you see your divinity. And hopefully you better see everyone's divinity. If you wake up and only see your divinity, your heart will eventually, your awakened vision will close again. This is one of the things that people trip over is when they first wake up, they go into a place of transcendence. They think, I'm awake and no one else is. If you stay there, that is a very dangerous place to stay. Because very soon, that type of awakening leads to arrogance. It leads to aloofness. It leads to separation. I'm awake and you're not. But a true awakening, as it includes the heart, as you wake up, you see that I am God and you are God and everything is God. Everything is the Christ. Everything is divine. God is everywhere. Christ consciousness is everywhere. This radiance, this aliveness, this beauty is everywhere. And boy, if we want to help break down the momentum of karma on planet Earth, this is what we must all do, is to come into our hearts and see our beauty and to see the beauty of everyone and everything on this planet. It's funny, I told you I was hanging with a really rough crew this weekend, but one of the guys who was hanging around the campfire, he told me that he was a body modification specialist. Like that was one of his previous jobs. And I said, what exactly does that mean? And he stuck out his tongue and he had like the slit in his tongue, like the lizard tongue kind of thing. He told me he used to have horns on his head. He had tattoos all over his body. And, another fun thing he told me is he worked in the adult industry. And, but when I looked at this boy, I just saw such a beautiful heart. I didn't see a jaded human being. I didn't see a dark human being with tattoos and all this and that. I saw a boy with a beautiful heart, a beautiful consciousness. And that's what he showed me. We were smiling about the jobs that he previously had on planet Earth. He lived in San Francisco and kind of got into that San Francisco tattoo body art scene. And it's easy for an ego just to look at someone with tattoos and say, oh, they are that, that guy or that girl, whatever. They're that person. But when your heart is open and you see someone, you see their divinity. You see their brilliance. You see their heart. You don't see their karma and their pain or their confusion. You see their goodness. Their goodness. And it's a beautiful thing. And this is one of the most healing things you can do for another human being, is to see their goodness. To see their goodness. Okay. So, here's something from Kate. She writes, hi Craig, grateful for these satsangs. You had mentioned with Kundalini that the fear turns into aliveness. Anything I can do to quicken this process? I know I must open and release. It affects my vision and quality of life so much. Much love. Kate, yeah, one of the things I encourage anyone to do on the spiritual path is to experience their experience. Let's see if I can say this correctly. To directly experience your experience as energy. So if we remove, say, for example, the word fear from our consciousness and just look at fear directly, experience it directly, what you'll notice is fear has a lot of energy. It has a tremendous amount of aliveness. When you sit with fear, it feels like a very intense, just vibrating radiance. And so then you begin to shift in the way, you relate to this thing we called fear in the past. I used to be plagued by fear for months at a time. I mean, it would be like 6 or 9 months at a time. I'd have these bouts where I would be stuck and just screaming terror would be just in my consciousness as I was opening to something and trying to release it. And I had fearful thoughts, terrifying thoughts, end of the world thoughts, doomsday thoughts, just, thoughts of, it literally sounded in my head like, 10,000 people were being burned alive. I just heard this screaming. And when the mind hears something like that, we tend to run away from it. But at some point, my teacher he actually told me this again and again and again. Turn toward it, Craig. Look at it, examine it, experience it directly. Experience the feeling directly without the word fear. And so I sat with it, and I sat with it more, and I sat with it more, and I sat with it more. And as I sat with it more without the word fear, without that kind of, putting a box over this experience saying, this is fear, this is bad, I removed that box, that word, that definition. And I can feel it right now. I just feel eternal radiance flowing through my consciousness. What I once thought was fear, I began to realize was just eternal radiance. What the Buddha calls luminosity. What a good Christian might call the Christ, the energy of radiance. When the mind doesn't understand it, it'll quickly put a label on it and say it's something bad. And Kate, I assume no one's chasing you. I assume you're in no danger. But when the mind has a big experience like a Kundalini awakening, and if we're aligned with a very small aspect of our egoic, insecure consciousness, and we look at something huge, we can go into an, oh my God, I don't know what this is, it's going to kill me. Whereas if you give yourself permission to breathe and actually look, is this thing actually harming me? No. It may feel like it's harming you. It may feel hot. It may feel cold. It may feel overwhelming. But if you breathe through it, it opens into the experience of aliveness. And this is the only way forward. If it was real fear based on a real life experience, like an actual danger, then I would say, yes, please run. That's what run or fight or hide, do what's wise. But with Kundalini, it's just energy waking up. That's all this is. It's just energy waking up. And most human beings are terrified of energy. I have another question from, let me see if I can pull it up here. This fella wrote, let me see if I can find it. Basically something like, hey, Craig, I had a big release. My body started doing strange things, and I wanted to go to the doctor and get it checked out. How should I communicate this to him without getting, carted away? And so, it's a very interesting thing. On the spiritual path, it is normal for you to open up and to have big, incredible, energetic experiences. Your body may shake, it may tremble, you may go into strange, bizarre spiritual states. A couple of times a month I'll go into samadhi where I can't move and I'm drooling on myself and things like that. But I'm not going to go to the doctor and tell her, hey, Dr. Fraley, my mind goes blank and I start drooling on myself and I disappear for sometimes hours at a time. I'm not going to do that, because that would just confuse her, and then, she would want to run a bunch of brain scans. Now this person, I believe his name is Steven, said, I want to, I want to get some tests done and ask about brain tumors and this and that. It's like, by all means, if you think you have a brain tumor, go to the doctor and get some brain scans done. Please do that if you have any fear or, anything where you think you have, an actual brain tumor or something really wrong with you, go to the doctor and get it checked out. Sometimes with Kundalini, you can have co-arising phenomena, co-arising symptoms. So say, for example, if you have a history of mental illness, a history of bipolar disorder, and your Kundalini wakes up, there's going to be a good chance that it's going to create some manic episodes. And so some of that's going to be Kundalini, and some of that's going to be the bipolar stuff. Kundalini is going to bring up all your trauma. And it's just doing it because it wants you to face it with love. It's not doing it to punish you or anything like that. But it wants you to face it with love and to heal it, because Kundalini has the innate desire that you heal and integrate so that you can embody the experience of enlightenment. And so, if you ever think you need to go to the doctor, please go to the doctor. But you need to be able to discern what is a spiritual experience and what is a physical symptom of actual sickness. Like Kate is writing that she's having, vision problems and this and that. So it's common that, if you have a strong internal critic, an internal judge, then the Kundalini flows up through, the third eye area, and you have a strong critic or judge. That the eyes will kind of squint, the energy will get stuck in the face, the vision will blur from what's called a kriya. Now, if you're having a vision problem related to cataracts or, because you got something stuck in your eye, I've had stuff stuck in my eye before. Go see the doctor. Go see the doctor. Just, if you have some money, go get checked out. But again, don't tell the doctor all your great spiritual experiences, because if they don't have the understanding and the training, there's a good chance they'll think you're going into psychosis or something really wrong with you. I've met countless individuals who've been diagnosed as psychotic or depressed or bipolar, when they're just having a spiritual awakening. But if there's something real that's happening, or if you want to get help with discernment, spend an hour with someone who's good with diagnosis. I'm trained in diagnosis, by the way, with mental health stuff. Or see a doctor who's trained in diagnosis and see what they have to say. It's good to get all the support you need. Okay, so I think I did a good job with the questions so far. Let me see if there's one more here. Another question here is, Craig, as usual, my question has to do with Kundalini. My head feels like it's going to explode with pressure, and some days it affects my vision and perception. Do you have any words on how to help this integrate? Yeah, instead of focusing on the pressure, focusing on the space beyond the mind. So this is true whether you're struggling with head pressure due to Kundalini, or if you're having crazy thoughts, crazy emotions. So most human beings know this. Know this experience. Can you focus on the space in which the pressure is arising, the space in which the thoughts of fear are arising, or the thoughts of neurosis are arising, the feelings of anxiety are arising? Focus on the space in which everything is arising. As soon as you begin to allow your consciousness to expand and focus on the spaciousness that's here, that explosion can actually take place. It can explode and release. So let the energy explode and release into the spaciousness that's here. So that's what I'm going to invite you to focus on. So any type of mindfulness or vipassana meditation could be helpful, but take it a step further. Sometimes it's good just to go outside and look at the vastness of the sky. Or do what I did this weekend, go out in the middle of the desert and just, stand up on a cliff and look out at the vast expanse of the universe. It's hard to take your thoughts seriously. Or even like the pain and the trembling in my body that I was experiencing from beating myself up, crack climbing. When you get to the top of the climb, or you just kind of hang off and just look out at the vast expanse of the world. It puts things in perspective real quick. And you begin to immediately feel much better. Okay. So, Richard, you still here? And do you have a question? And if so, they'd like me to be done at 8 o'clock. So just be quick if you can with your question.
Yeah, I think this one could be quick. Next, last week, you talked to me about what it means to settle into experiences and almost like own them. And I've just been sitting with that, and I thought, well, it couldn't be an egoic owning, right? Because that doesn't make sense. So I'm asking, what does it mean to own the experience?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. So I'm speaking about coming into your heart and living your truth. And so, a lot of people, teach in a way that that we always have to be vigilant and make sure our ego doesn't co-opt, say for example, our spiritual awakening. And so let's use the transcendent awakening, for example. If we step into vast spacious emptiness and freedom, and then our ego comes along and says, I am vast spacious emptiness and freedom. There is nobody here. And we start playing that ego game of being identified with it from ego. We will surely suffer, and we will cause suffering, we'll cause karma, we'll cause pain and confusion, and we will limit our consciousness. We'll limit our experience. But if you have the experience of spiritual awakening by way of grace, which is almost always how it comes, what the grace expects of you is that you embody this. It's coming to you not just to give you something temporarily. Grace comes to you because it wants you to embody it. It wants you to live it. It wants you to bring it here on planet Earth. And so say, for example, Richard, you work in the field of counseling. And so one of the ways we can embody and own it, vast spacious emptiness, is when a client sits before you, someone who's deeply struggling, and you're able to stand in the place of the big picture as vast, spacious, and free. And you look at this individual, you look at them on the level of soul, that they are a soul, that they are a divine being. They are not just the problem that they are bringing before you. They are not just simply a diagnosable condition. And you check off, okay, they have everything that says they are manic depressive, and so I'm going to label them as that from the DSM-5. You look at your life, you embody this experience of hugeness. And so when grace comes to you and gives you vast spacious emptiness, you step into it. You embody it. And if you see that you've fallen out of it, you course correct. And you say, what happened here? I somehow stepped back into my ego. But that's not my truth. My truth is to be vast and spacious and to be free. I'm going to actively choose to step into that again. I'm going to choose to honor the space that's here. I'm going to call upon it. I'm going to witness it. I'm going to acknowledge it. I'm going to call it forward in my experience and awaken this truth again. See, oftentimes God will come to us and give us a gift of awakening. But God also expects that you work for it, that you embody it, that you own it, that you step into it from a place of radical humility. So this is no ego at all. The only way you can own your awakening is through you meeting it, you surrendering into it, you owning it, through letting it own you. You fall in love with it, it falls in love with you. So deeply that there's no walls. And more as we do this, we realize, oh, I cannot fall out of the truth. I can trip, I can stumble, I'm human. But I can't ever fall completely out of the truth because I am owned by it. And I have chosen it and it has chosen me. And so this is a great topic. I wish I got to your question sooner, but the path of spiritual awakening demands you give your life to it. What most people want on the path is they just want God to give them a gift and then they make their life simple and easy. But that's not how it works. On this path, God demands of us that we show up and we work. So whatever she gives to us, whatever God gives to us, we have to rise to the occasion if we want to embody it, if we want to own it. And when we own it, we become a fit vehicle for God, a fit vehicle for grace. And again, this is a path of being a servant, being a slave to God, being a slave to the path of truth. I am not speaking about some egoic arrogance where we walk around with our chest puffed out saying, I alone am the awakened one. Like I'm not speaking about that. I'm speaking about a path of radical humility. Radical humility. When we're humble, an immense strength comes forward out of the depth of our being. And great things can happen. And that's what our world needs. Our world needs us not only to wake up, but to step into this truth and actually live it for the sake of our brothers and sisters and fellow human beings and species here on planet Earth. And so anyways,
Thanks, Greg.
Yeah, of course. Beautiful question, Richard. Thank you so much for showing up and your willingness to ask questions. And I put this out to everyone. If anyone has a question, raise your hand, holler at me, and I'd be happy to talk with you. I don't just have to respond to email questions. You're welcome to get, if you want to interact, I'm here. And so anyways, it's been my absolute pleasure to be here with you all this evening. Thank you all truly for your donations and your support. And, let us just send out a prayer of love to all of our brothers and sisters on planet Earth, asking for healing for this planet. Healing with the coronavirus, but more importantly, healing with the tremendous suffering that's happening in this day and age. People who are stuck in slavery, people who are living in war and violence and confusion and addiction. All the great species of this planet who are suffering the effects of deforestation and climate change. Let us send love in the direction of all beings. All beings. So thank you all so much, and good night, everyone. Bye for now.